Hello and welcome to a Thursday edition of Showdown Breakdown. My name is Adam Levitan, as always, joined by Cody Main and Gary Hartman, this time for a big cock Brock Purdy against comeback player of the year, hopefully Geno Smith. Cody, good afternoon.
I'm glad you said it first because I didn't know if I could say cock on this family-oriented program, but I am very excited for Big Cock Brock tonight. This is not the NFC West battle we thought we were going to get when the season started, but here we are nonetheless.
You cannot say cock in the way you just said cock as a one-off. You can, however, say big cock Brock. Okay, Gary, how's it going this afternoon?
I'm good, man. I'm excited. I was telling Cody just before. I like this game. I'm excited for it. I think it's a fun showdown slate too. So.
Okay, what we have here is a San Francisco team which is absolutely loaded, but will not have Deebo Samuel tonight. And Deebo Samuel, obviously one of my favorite fades in the entire world. So I'm actually a little bit disappointed he's not on this slate, but it is going to open up a massive opportunity for, or at least a significantly more opportunity for a lot of other guys. That's one thing to handle. On the other side, we are expecting Kenneth Walker back for this game. And a big question, I think, is A, how healthy do you think Kenneth Walker is? B, will he be limited at all? I do have a take on that, which we'll get to at the running back position when we get there. But anyways, Cody, how do you see this slate from a macro perspective?
You know, from the top, I think we need to talk about the Deebo Samuel stuff because for any other team, when somebody like a Deebo Samuel is ruled out with his target share, with what he does on the ground, like normally that would open up a ton of value, but it doesn't necessarily open up a ton of value for the way this San Francisco team is priced and the way they're structured to divvy up their targets and their opportunities. So from that perspective, it really makes the slate difficult from a pricing perspective. And you'll see that as we go down to the roster construction projections that it is going to be relatively balanced tonight because it's tough to load up on any one of these teams because I think pricing is relatively efficient. We don't have those slam dunk value plays that you think you would have with somebody like Deebo ruled out.
Yeah, I mean, this is a natural bounce back spot for Seattle. In other words, I mean, they played one of the worst games I've seen them play all year in a home loss to the Panthers. Geno was just awful. Geno played the worst game he's played all year, even though he did look good in the end from a fantasy perspective. And then you get a kind of a public spot here, I think, where short road favorite on a short week is kind of trappy, I think, in general. So my leans are more towards the Seahawks stuff in the roster construction, but we can go through all of that. We will start at the quarterback position where, as of, I don't know, an hour ago, it was announced that Brock Purdy is expected to start, will start via Adam Schefter. And so, you know, he had this oblique thing, this rib thing, you know, doesn't sound great. I would say there's some chance, maybe a little bit heightened chance more than usual, that Brock Purdy does not finish this game, you know, maybe somewhere 2, 3, 4% or something like that. Whereas for quarterbacks, I think it's more usually typically closer to 1 or 2%. They don't finish. That said, on the other side, we have Geno, who is obviously, I think, the better player, the more aggressive player. Over the last 5 weeks, the Seahawks lead the entire NFL in pass rate over expectation, but it's a very difficult matchup. So, Gary, what do you think about Geno and quarterback stuff tonight?
Yeah, I mean, I love Big Cock Brock as much as the next guy. I think he's a fun story, and I actually think he's pretty good, especially under Shanahan's system, but you could really make an argument against him here, right? I'm with you on the Seattle side. Just throwing it out there. I think you get the hook, the 3.5 on Seattle. I think it's a great bet in general. And, you know, look great at home. Obviously, his first road start in a place that's very hard to play in Seattle, in division. And you know, that it's a real home crowd there in Seattle, one of the best in the league. So I think this is a really tough spot for Brock Purdy. I'm going to be leaning away from him, even though he's only 40% owned. I think he's just, I really believe in the Seattle side here. So I'm definitely into Geno. I'm into different Geno combinations. I'm into Geno at captain. I'm definitely into Lockett and Metcalf at captain with Geno in my pool. I'll be over on Geno, but I'm sour on Brock here tonight.
I mean, my thing on Brock is like, if you would have played Jimmy Garoppolo at 9,600, shouldn't you be playing Brock at 9,600? Is there really a difference? I don't know. And like, I just because I think Seattle will play well here doesn't mean that 9,600 quarterback can't play well. I don't know, Cody. What do you think Jimmy Garoppolo would have been priced here? Because honestly, like, I don't think their outlook is that different.
Yeah, I think he would have been 9,600. And I think you're right. And I kind of dropped the same comment in the establishment on Discord and just said, you know, in terms of at least cash game considerations, if this was a Jimmy Garoppolo slate, would we have played Jimmy Garoppolo in cash? And we probably would have, given the pricing on some of the rest of these guys on the slate. And I kind of feel the same way about Brock Purdy, though it does feel a little bit reactionary to a 2-game sample. Although it's not, it has a little bit less to do with Brock Purdy and more about Kyle Shanahan and more about
Right.
the spot and just more about the slate context as a whole. So I think Brock is okay in cash, and we'll get to why, because of some of the skill position options that he's priced around and some of the volatility surrounding them. I think Brock's okay in cash. To me, both quarterbacks, the ownership and the price tags look relatively efficient. DraftKings certainly didn't do us any favors with Geno Smith's price tag. He's the second most expensive player on the slate, only $800 cheaper than CMC. And for that reason, I think that his ownership will be kept in check, which is nice for tournaments. But starting from a cash game perspective, I think I'm loading up on both QBs. I want tournament exposure to both. I'm just trying to figure out how to play around that.
Yeah, the take that I think is right on Brock Purdy is that when you have Kittle, CMC, Debo, Ayuk, Kyle Shanahan, like you're only asked to do so much. Jimmy Garoppolo was not asked to do very much either. And like Silva said on the team by team, guys like Matt Schaub and Kirk Cousins can have huge success in the Shanahan scheme when you have guys like this. Now, he won't have Debo tonight, which I think matters because Debo can take a 5-yard slant to the house probably just as well as anybody else in the entire league. So I think that caps a little bit. And it does hurt Brock. But yeah, I'm still into Brock here. Let's go to running back. So my Seattle take is that actually Kenneth Walker was pretty close to playing last week, which surprised me. But this was not like a standard ankle sprain where he rolled the outside. He actually hurt the inside of his foot. They called it like a jammed ankle or something like that. Full practice, not on the final injury report. I thought he could have even forced his way onto the field last week. They held him out here for a big divisional game against San Francisco. Maybe they thought they could have beat Carolina without him. Of course, they couldn't. Now, so I actually think we have no injury docs on Kenneth Walker. I actually think Kenneth Walker is 100% here. The problem, Cody, is more the matchup. It's been very difficult to run on San Francisco for much of the year. So what do you think about Kenneth Walker here? And then we'll have Travis Homer back in his natural role. Very clearly last week, Travis Homer is the feature back. They were just like, screw it, let's just throw the ball in every play, which I actually think was right. But that's going to be a different game plan here tonight. But yeah, Kenneth Walker matchup stuff is tough. What do you think about him?
Yeah, and I don't want to ever overreact to the matchup stuff, but man, this is per our DVP tool, the toughest matchup in the league for opposing running backs. Limiting opposing running backs to 10.1% less production than average, and that's quite a bit. I don't want to overreact to somebody like Kenneth Walker who could step back into a bell cow role, but looking at tournaments specifically, he is one of the guys on the slate that is actually comes in a little bit underpriced, and I think the fact that he is a little bit underpriced is going to funnel people more towards him in tournaments. And man, I am just a little bit concerned about the matchup, just given how good San Francisco has been at limiting opposing rushing attacks, and the fact that they kind of want to just funnel more production through the air. So I have some questions. Maybe somebody else can talk me into Kenneth Walker, but if he was a little bit more expensive and kept the ownership in check, I might have a little bit more interest, but I think he's just too cheap and going to be played too often.
Gary, do you have a Kenneth Walker take? I can give one in a second.
Yeah, I just think the price tag is too small for me to completely ignore despite the matchup here. Assuming he's going to get the majority of the work. I'm not too, 42%, maybe it'll come in a little higher than that. I'm not too deterred. I was ready to come say I'm against it, but then when I saw the tag, I think it's just too cheap for what the upside is.
Yeah, I think 7,600 Kenneth Walker on Showdown is like 1,500 too cheap. Yep. Way too cheap. I understand the matchup is difficult, but I do think that he will be pretty fresh here. And in stories where Seattle wins the game, I think Kenneth Walker scores touchdowns. So yeah, in your 5-1s, I guess, and 4-2s and stuff like that, in lineups where you're predicting Seattle to win the game, I like Kenneth Walker. Travis Homer at 7K is going to be like completely unowned as the strict passing down and backup. I don't even know if I can do this as a so bad it's good, Cody. I mean, I don't think I can do that.
Yeah, I think they had to leave him priced up just on the off chance that Kenneth Walker didn't play, so we didn't have a free square situation. Yeah, I mean, you're really asking for a lot. It would be like a Ramondre situation from the last slate where you just hope that Kenneth Walker, well, not hope, but you're expecting Kenneth Walker to get hurt early, and therefore Travis Homer pays off. But I wouldn't have any interest otherwise.
By the way, I'm such a stone cold donkey. We actually talked about it. I was like, you know what? 90% Ramondre. I only made 5 teams. I didn't play any Ramondre, but in those teams, I didn't play any Kevin Harris or Pierre Strong. Like, what am I doing? Like, what in the world was I doing? That was so bad. Anyways, on the other side, we have our king, our healthy king, one of the few first, second, third round picks who has actually stayed healthy through the entire year. I know, it's crazy. Who could believe it? Anyways, Christian McCaffrey comes into this game healthy. And I know it looked like Jordan Mason played a lot last week. Before the game was 35-0. Christian McCaffrey had 14 carries and Jordan Mason had 0. And so we have obviously a big projection on Christian McCaffrey here. I think with good reason. We have him for around 5 catches. We have him for around 19 carries. And of course, he is one of the best players from efficiency basis in the entire game. It's going to be hard, I think, to make lineups without Christian McCaffrey tonight. You see that reflected in 88% ownership, but not impossible. Gary, do you have the GPP bro take on Christian McCaffrey at 88% total, 29% captain?
Super hard to ignore him tonight and even come in under, I think. Obviously, you could do it because it's really expensive and you're immediately getting contrarian with 88% total ownership or whatever we have there. But you could really paint a picture that no matter how this game goes, it's at the backs of Christian McCaffrey, right? If they're playing from behind, like I might anticipate them to, then he's getting Austin Eckler type work through the air, I think. If they're playing from ahead and they get up big, I think that's at the back of Christian McCaffrey with a banged up rookie quarterback on the road. It's a lot of CMC doing his thing. Now, I think just pure game theory, if I was MMEing, I would probably come in a little bit under the field here and just try to differentiate my lineups out to some more balance. I want to play into some more 4-2, 5-1 Seattle stuff anyway. 88% is a lot of total ownership. 30% of captain is a lot of total ownership, but I don't think it's bad chalk.
It's tough to click Jordan Mason, considering when the game was close last week, the dude like literally didn't even play. But on a short week, you can make a case that maybe he plays a little bit more. I think he's worth a sprinkle. Use check, you know the deal. He's going to get 1 to 3 targets or so, and maybe a carry. And he has been efficient on that work in his career. Let's go to wide receiver. I want to start with Seattle because it has been mostly tight. Now we have seen Marquise Goodwin pop up lately for some bigger games. I don't think that's very sustainable. The Geno doubles is something that has been working on main slates. I've been playing it a ton when it's priced right, and it's actually been coming in relatively lightly owned here. I see no reason to think that Metcalf and Lockett can't have good games here despite the matchup. Cody, what do you think about Seattle pass catchers? And you know what? Let's talk tight end here too, because it's kind of dusty.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up tight end because it is really thin in the pass catching core. It's really 3 guys that you can roster. And Marquise Goodwin is so overpriced that I think he's a tough click unless you really expect this game to get out of hand like it did last week against Carolina when they really went 3 wide receiver heavy. And that's when we saw Marquise Goodwin pop off. You mentioned the Geno doubles, and we run into these situations where it seems like it should be so obvious, but it's priced in a way that it's tough to fit. So you could do a Geno captain with Lockett and Metcalf, and you feel like you're playing into a ton of ownership. But because it's likely going to get you off of Purdy, it's likely going to get you away from CMC and into some of these cheaper San Francisco options, it's going to come in relatively lowly owned. And I kind of like doing that, especially if we think Seattle plays well. It's going to come through the passing attack, I think, most often. And so you can get away with these double stacks from, just kind of a 1v1 situation on Lockett and Metcalf here, where they're just separated by $200, where the price tags, where the ownership is relatively close. I have a slight preference towards Metcalf. That's kind of just a volume-based thing. I know Lockett has been more efficient, but if you look at just the underlying usage, it's all Metcalf, through this point of the season, and it's been Lockett being a little bit more efficient on those opportunities, but air yards, target share, end zone target share, all of those kind of in favor of Metcalf, and just kind of want to bank on, a big outing here from Metcalf.
Yeah, I mean, the Marquise Goodwin at 6,400, I think is interesting. I do not think Marquise Goodwin is a very good NFL player. And he reminds me of there's been some slates where maybe we glossed over Rashid Shaheed and guys like that too much, but those guys were 2K. Or 2,500. Marquise Goodwin is 6,400. That's a much different story to me. But yeah, if you want to play the so bad that it's good on Marquise Goodwin, I'm more okay with that than something like Travis Homer. Maybe Marquise Goodwin can at least make a big play for you. I don't think that's something that I'll be doing. Noah Fant, I had some clicks in tournaments in main slate where I was like, Fant or Evan Ingram last week, and I went back and forth, and that was like a 45-point difference.
Me too.
So that was same thing. That was not great, but yeah, I think that Will Dissly and Noah Fant as showdown tight end touchdown candidates is at least worth mentioning. On the other side, Gary, is where we have far more interesting stuff with Debo out. I mean, Ayuk's history with Debo out is very, very, very good. I like Brandon Ayuk here a lot at 8,800. To me, he is the biggest beneficiary of no Debo because they can start to run some more stuff close to the line of scrimmage that maybe they would have run to Debo. Now we'll go to Ayuk. I also think there's more for George Kittle, who we know the deal on George Kittle. He can get 2 targets in a game. He can get 10 targets in a game and just have absolutely massive games. So, Gary, what do you think about 49ers pass catchers without Debo tonight?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with your sentiment on Ayuk. I think he's a really good play, but Kittle's my favorite guy here by a long shot, and or by a lot, I should say. And I get how frustrating he's been. Like, he is the ultimate boomer bust guy, and we've had a lot of busts. But we know what the ceiling is there. This is a great matchup. I think second most fantasy points, 2 tight ends. Might be a little bit more comfortable for Purdy in the middle of the field if he's not playing, 100%. Maybe the A-dot stuff's low, but he could do some after the catch stuff. And only 26 total percent, 4% captain. I would want to double that up, I think. I want to get to 8 to 10% Kittle captain here tonight. I think there's a great ceiling there. So I like both those guys. And if you want to play into a more 49ers heavy thing, I think a Purdy double with the 2 of them is totally fine.
We see these really short, really low prices on guys that make everything work at times. Danny Gray is thin to me, but I think Ray McLeod is kind of the cheap guy that people are going to want to click at some point here, thinking that he's going to be on the field in 3 wide receiver sets. Jawan Jennings is actually like a reasonable NFL wide receiver, but we only have a 2-point projection difference between him and Ray. What do you think about those dust ball guys, Cody?
Yeah, we've talked about this a lot more on main slates now too, in trying to keep track of ownership and figure out where, places where things are going to get steamed. And we've seen recently that like the minimum priced running back or the lowest priced viable running back ends up catching a little bit more ownership than even we can account for. And that's happened on Showdown slates too. Like the lowest priced skill position player that is viable and, could be a cash game option even ends up getting more owned than maybe he should be. And I think that is Ray McLeod tonight. We haven't necessarily seen a ton of games without Debo, but we did see it happen in the middle of the season, week 8 or week 9. And Jennings was also out in that game. But this team, when they were without Debo, went really 2 tight end heavy, multi-back heavy. They didn't run out a bunch of 3 wide receiver sets. And this team is one that already doesn't use a lot of 3 wide receiver sets. So I know Ray McLeod is going to have a decent base projection. If you're using an optimizer, he's going to pop in a lot of optimizers. I think that could result in 25-30% total ownership. And the floor is 0 on Ray McLeod. He could play 25-30% of the snaps. He could be in every 3 wide receiver set. I think that the range is wide, and if he's going to catch a bunch of ownership, I kind of just want to try and steer clear from it if I can.
Yeah, 25% plus on Ray McLeod is just like a no-brainer X out for me if I was making 5-10 teams, something like that. The defenses are certainly in play here. With the way that Geno dropped back, and that's why I'm a little bit frustrated with myself for not playing Panthers D last week. It was just so obvious last week that without Kenneth Walker, they were just going to throw the ball in every play, and that sets up so well for the opposing defense, specifically one like the 49ers. Now, I do think with Kenneth Walker back, they will try to have a much more run-heavy attack here. We'll see if they are able to sustain it, but it is expensive here for defense 49ers at 5K. You can save a ton by going down to the Seahawks at 3,200. What do you think about the specialists tonight, Cody?
Yeah, I kind of hope the 5K price tag brings the 49ers defense ownership down a little bit. I'm not convinced that it will because this range is kind of barren in total. You have Jordan Mason, who doesn't project very well, and then you get down to like Fant and these guys. So I think that the ownership is going to come up a little bit. I like them from kind of a matchup perspective. I think the Seahawks are still going to pass quite a bit. I think their offensive line is suspect. And then you have the 49ers defensive line who can certainly apply pressure. So I like the 49ers DST if ownership is held in check, and we can maybe pair that up with the 4-2-5-1 49ers stuff and just hope for kind of an onslaught. The kickers in this game, I think, are going to be the ones that do see their ownership steamed up quite a bit in tournaments. When you get these situations where the value from the skill position perspective is guys like Kyle Juszczyk and Will Dissly and Ray McLeod, you do see ownership on the kickers get steamed up quite a bit. I think they make for relatively strong cash game options. I'm just going to keep an eye on it in tournaments because I think we could be looking at 30% plus here.
I did take a peek at the weather. It looks pretty clean out there in Seattle, which is somewhat surprising for this late in the year. But yeah, not much wind and no precipitation really in the forecast. All right, we'll take as many questions as we can here regarding this slate before we get to the flag plant portion of the program. Do you have any favorite roster constructions here tonight, Cody? Any 4-2-5-1. Any game script things on your mind?
Yeah, I know Gary mentioned the 1-5 off air that he's kind of into the Seattle side, and he mentioned the bet too on the front end. I like the 2-4. I don't know if I can get myself to 1-5, but the way that Seattle scores fantasy points, I think there's multiple paths to them getting there. Even if they don't win outright, even if they don't cover the 3 points, I think in a losing effort, because they are more pass happy because they can spread the ball around a little bit more, you could still see 2-4 get there. And if there is one roster construction type build to get squeezed out, I think it would be the Seattle heavy stuff.
Little Tunchi's in the chat for the second straight show. Little Tunchi, welcome back, buddy. I know it took till week 15 for you to show up, but we're still happy to have you.
Did he just like self-exclude and then is finally back now for week 15, or what happened here? Because we were missing Little Tunchi. But
Little Tunchi, where have you been for the last 3 months? First of all, second of all, Cody, do you have any FanDuel takes for Little Tunchi?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to get more well versed on this stuff pre-show, because now that Tunchi's back, I can't come in ill prepared. But it looks like the pricing over here is relatively similar. We are getting a cheaper price tag on Marquise Goodwin over there, a guy who is, if he's going to get there, is going to get there on long touchdowns, I would imagine most often. I think he makes a little bit more sense. On FanDuel, Noah Fant is relatively cheap, a guy that, is going to get there on touchdowns most likely. I think he is in play. Looking at the top of the board, Christian McCaffrey separates a little bit more and could come with a little bit less ownership. Geno Smith is $500 cheaper than Brock Purdy. Think he makes for a fantastic play over there. And then, George Kittle, again, pretty cheap over on FanDuel.
The thing about FanDuel, just generally speaking, is you want touchdowns and as many of them as you can get. So guys like Ray McLeod and Marquise Goodwin, to me, are not as valuable as guys like Noah Fant, who's cheaper, and Will Disley, guys who can actually or are more likely to score touchdowns. And then also on FanDuel, it looks like by going down to those guys, Fant and guys like that, you can really play some studs, some touchdown scores. Anyways, we don't think FanDuel one game is beatable. That's why we don't talk about it very much. Little Tunchi knows this, but it's part of the bid at this point. We can't ignore it. All right. Favorite punt tonight from George. Favorite punt tonight. Good question, George. Let me see.
I'll throw one out there, and George, tell me how punty we're talking about here, because this is a guy that I would only use in the largest field tournaments on DraftKings. I think Danny Gray is interesting. We don't exactly know how this team is going to roll out its wide receiver rotation tonight. Assuming Danny Gray is active, then I think the fact that he's coming in at 3% owned, and you have Ray McLeod, who's $1,000 more expensive at 25% owned, I think that might be a mistake. And to be clear, that is in the largest field stuff in an MME type portfolio.
Yeah, I don't have any great punts tonight, George. I think it's a slate that, to me, optimal is more balanced. Gary, I don't know. What do you think about balance versus finding a punt that, like Ray McLeod's going to be freaking 25%. Like, it's thin down there at the punts.
Yeah, I think balance is probably more optimal, but I don't mind Showdown King Will Disley. We've seen him be a Showdown, winner many times, I feel like, in the past, and still has a, Fant's obviously increased his role as the season gone on, but Disley's still running a good amount of routes and seems to have like one shot downfield each game. So I don't mind taking a shot on Disley as a punt.
Thoughts on Juszczyk? Yeah, we mentioned Juszczyk briefly, and we are showing Juszczyk overs and props. It's just like every week we show goddamn Juszczyk overs and props, and it's just like some fluke thing where he gets there, but he has been getting there a lot. It's so hard for me to be excited about a fullback here. I don't know, Cody. Any hope at 3K for Juszczyk?
Yeah, I saw the prop stuff, and I don't usually venture over to the props channel too often in Discord, but when I saw it, I had to look into it a little bit further, and there might be a little bit something to it, at least more recently with Eli Mitchell being out. His routes have been up a little bit. Potentially now with Debo out, it's possible that he ends up getting more manufactured touches. So, I kind of like the fact that he's 3K, but at 3K, he's going to have to like legitimately do something to pay off that tag.
Right. Let's see. Chris says, do you guys like kicker at captain tonight? I struggle with the captain kicker stuff because I feel like the ceiling is capped. On a rare instance. Yeah, a guy goes for like 4 or 5 field goals. Obviously, it's the Stones, but that is so unlikely. This game, though, reasonable weather. I think two offenses that can be efficient, but aren't locks to be efficient in the red zone. I guess I could see it. I don't know. Either you guys have thoughts on kicker captain?
I think this question gets brought up a little bit more recently because I think more people are playing cash, and captain kicker in cash has been, I think, profitable long term. On slates like tonight, where one guy separates so much from the field, and then you kind of have this group of guys that's next, and I mean CMC, I think you really want to try and start your build with CMC at captain. That might funnel you onto some of these really bad punt plays. But I think if you even get a median performance from CMC tonight, you're probably going to be upset that he wasn't your captain even in cash games.
Let's go to CMC. How does he compare to Ramondre from Monday? I mean, to me, Christian McCaffrey is underpriced, but similarly how he's underpriced on a main slate. In other words, like when Christian McCaffrey is 8,500, 9K, 9,500 on main slate, like he's not a must because he's so expensive, right? And I would say it's similarly here to Showdown. He's still a great value at 11,400, but he's not a must. Ramondre was a different thing because he was only 8,800. So yeah. From Jason and Kittle lineups, Max 1 and Ayuk Jennings were okay grouping the three together. This is basically asking, can you see Brock Purdy supporting three pass catchers? Definitely Kittle and flex. I would have Max 1, I think, on Ayuk Jennings. But what about if Kittle is in flex, Gary? What do you think about 3 49ers pass catchers in this spot?
I would basically need a Purdy captain in that spot, I think.
Right.
I don't think there's any other path there, unless this game's just really weird. But
yeah, Cody, what do you think about multiple San Francisco pass catcher lineups?
Yeah, I agree. I'm okay with all three of them, but I would have Brock Purdy in that lineup. Even if you went Kittle captain and Ayuk Jennings flex, you still, I think that's okay given Jennings price tag, but you still need Purdy in that lineup somewhere.
This Danny Gray versus Ray Ray thing. I want to be very clear. Even in a blowout, I mean, an absolute blowout last week, Danny Gray ran 3 routes. Like, Danny Gray might run 0 routes in this game. So I can't condone like using your single entry dollars on Danny Gray. You'd have to be a really hardcore GPP bro, I think, to do so. I understand Debo is out now. Maybe that opens up a little bit more, but it's going to, like, I guess it's a good question, Cody. Gray at 200 with very little ownership, or Ray McCloud at 1,200 with a lot of ownership?
When I'm thinking about my single entry teams tonight, I'm mostly just trying to flip the build and do what you guys were just talking about with a more balanced approach and not have to play into that $1,200, $200 range. But man, if I told you that in a single entry tournament, Ray McCloud checked in at 35-40% ownership, which might end up happening, so you can fit all these guys, and Danny Gray was still 3, 4, 5%. I mean, yeah, Ray McCloud's going to outscore him a vast majority of the time, but it might not be 10-1. I don't know. It's a play that you're likely, very, very likely taking a 0 on. But I think there are equal chances, maybe not equal chances, but there are similar opportunities for Ray McCloud to just put up 0 for you as well.
Yeah. And by the way, I think Danny Gray can play. I mean, he was a team preseason guy. Danny Gray made a lot of noise to make this team in the preseason. I actually took him in some 20th round best ball stuff, which turned out to be a total torch fest. But anyways, yeah, I think Danny Gray can play. I just don't know what his opportunity is going to be tonight. And, it's reflected there in ownership, and we have 4%. CMC and Mason together in a 5-1 build. So, yeah, like I said, the first 14 running back carries of the game went to Christian McCaffrey. Last week, it was 35-0. They go to Mason. On a short week, can you make a case that they go without Debo, more Mason? Absolutely. Like, absolutely. So I actually think this is totally fine. You would be betting that Jordan Mason gets in there for some garbage time and also some semblance of the base carries, and Christian McCaffrey goes out and catches 6 or 7 balls. I don't think that's crazy at all. So I'm actually okay with CMC and Jordan Mason together. Yes, we do have the Establish the Run company holiday party tonight. For most companies, this would mean getting a restaurant or some type of bar, and everybody would go and interact in real life. However, we don't interact in real life. This will be a virtual holiday party, and part of it is a free roll. Shout out to corporate. A free roll in a showdown slate. Do you guys want to reveal who your captain will be? And this is it'd probably be about 40 or 50 people in there. Shout out to all our employees and contributors. It'll probably be about 40 to 50 people in that size field. You want to reveal your captain, Gary, to Jake, who, by the way, does a great job with our voiceover stuff, and anyone else listening.
Yeah, I'm going Tony Jones captain. No, I'm not revealing my captain, bro. I want to win this thing. Come on, get the hell out of here.
All right. We didn't mention Colby Parkinson. They are playing 3 tight ends. I think Parkinson's the worst of them, but he'll also be the less owned, and I believe he's the cheapest. Yeah, he is. Cody, any thoughts on Parkinson?
Yeah, I actually think Parkinson's probably a more interesting, just like price point pivot away from the Ray McLeod chalk. And, the reason why Will Dissly, the reason why Noah Fant, the reason why Colby Parkinson had bad games last week was because they just went straight up 3 wide receiver sets from the moment that they were trailing, something that they don't often do. We all kind of expect this game to play a little bit closer, and in closer games, they are going to be trotting out 2-3 tight ends. And yeah, I think Parkinson makes sense as a large field tournament dart throw.
All right. I do have awards show. I'm also going on VSiN for any guys that have VSiN a little bit very soon here. And of course, I need to spend countless hours on my Showdown lineup tonight so that I can win the holiday party. So we better get to the flag plants. It is time for the planting of the flags. Gary has been out sick. It's only fair that he's back with the honors here.
All right. Well, I mentioned liking Seattle stuff, 4-2, 5-1s. I'm into that. But I think a viable strategy is going a Niners captain in some of those spots. Second in the league against tight ends. Cody and I need him for our FFBC main event team to make some noise in these championship rounds. Give me George Kittle for the big bounce back spot. I love flag planting the tight ends and Showdown. Mm-hmm. I want to be well overweight here on Kittle.
I like that. Yeah. And I some people were asking, I tweeted, I was half joking. Not really, though. I was looking at it. The Kittle versus Jeff Driscoll at tight end on Yahoo, where in season long, by the way, if you guys do have access to Jeff Driscoll, I do think that it's an interesting play depending on who your tight end is. But Kittle is like kind of the borderline where I'd cut it off, and I'd rather play Kittle than Jeff Driscoll, I think. Cody, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm kind of disappointed you went to Gary first because I think we're on the same page there with Kittle. The projection is so bad that he's actually not going to be owned, even though Debo is out, which is nice. I think that there are plenty of opportunities for him to give us one of those classic Kittle eruption spots. So hopefully we get that. On the other side, going to go with the PSM, going to go with the grown-ass man narrative. Not George Kittle, but George Kittle fits that narrative as well. Mm-hmm. DK Metcalf leads the Seahawks receivers in basically every category that you want to look at: target share, air yard share, red zone target share, end zone targets, doesn't matter. Belongs to DK Metcalf. He's $200 cheaper. I think the ownership will be, if not similar, DK will come in a little bit lower. So sign me up for DK Metcalf tonight.
I like both of those, man. DK Metcalf is such a grown-ass man. I want to just say Christian McCaffrey. Of course, that would be the easy way out. Can't flag plant a guy who's 88% owned. That's ridiculous. So I will stick to my take here that Kenneth Walker actually could have played last week. And therefore, all this FUD around him. Is he healthy? How's the ankle? Oh, but what about the defense? Adam, the defense. Kenneth Walker has done crazy things this year in terms of making big plays. And that's really what Showdown is all about. Kenneth Walker getting loose for like a 70-yard touchdown run and breaking the slate at 7,600 is not crazy by any stretch of the imagination whatsoever. I think that after watching the tape last week, Seattle, I think, will try to establish it here. Geno just did not play well last week. Now they get Kenneth Walker back. Huge divisional game. I think Kenneth Walker at 7,600 is 1,500. Underpriced. Flag plant. Optimal captain tonight. The man we call Gale Sayers, Kenneth Walker III.
I think that's a good one.
All right. That is going to do it for this Thursday Showdown breakdown. Appreciate you all being here. We will have updates to the projections and the ownership projections if you are a subscriber. If you're not a subscriber, head to StopIsToRun.com in green letters here. Shout out to us. Subscribe page. Everything we got going on. For Cody. For producer Adam. For Gary. I'm Adam. Good luck, everybody.